very good evening to you. Thank you for the fantastic comments you've been sending us on social media after Jonathan, Seth and myself gave you our best Elite League teams that the Sheffield Steelers have had. Now the three of us are going to debate and we're going to argue over whose team was best, and we're going to come up with a definitive Sheffield Steelers team. We'll hear from Jonathan in a moment. But Seth, first of all, remind us of your 20 players. Just off, if you're just joining us for the first time, 2 goalies, 6 defencemen, 12 forwards, 14 imports of rest, Indigenous British players. And Seth, your lineup was?
The ultimate elite Sheffield Steelers team, you mean? That's what we're talking about right here. My lineup. Pretty simple. Yeah, 2 goalies, Bronsard and my wild card, Ben Bounds. Okay, he didn't ice a minute, but he is the best British goalie that's ever been produced. And he's gone on to World Championships. And whilst there are others you're going to throw in there, he's the greatest backup that never played for the Sheffield Steelers, and that's a pretty decent list. As for the forwards, Talbot, Legui and Fretter was my line numero uno. Line 2, Dutium, the magical one at centre, with Robert Dowd, the golden child. Simpson, Simon and Ashley Tate make up my third unit. What a bunch of penalty killers we have there. The work rate of Simon, the speed of Simpson. And then we have the ultimate O-captain, my captain, grind line, Phillips, Perron and Debian. You would not want to play against them. They're like a dog with a bone every single night. As for the defensive core, well, it's pretty simple. There is no greater defenseman the Sheffield Steelers have had than Steve Munn. He's the guy that you're going to stretch your wagons to, and he's going to take you to the promised land. Rod Sarich, one of the most gifted skaters the Sheffield Steelers have ever had. You've got the daddy, the mean and nasty streak, the captain who will call you out in the locker room, on the bench, on the ice, in the bar, wherever you're doing wrong. Dion Darling is there to set you back on track. He's going to play with Kevin Bollybrook, just oozes class, can do a bit of everything for you. And then the final 2, my 2 British defensemen, one of the most gifted offensive players, irrespective of the fact that he's British, in Ben O'Connor. And you have to have somebody with him. And I said, playing with Ben O'Connor can cause you to lose your hair. Well, no better player to play with him than DAVEY PHILLIPS, who is losing his hair.
All the passion, all the emotion there from Seth Bennett. Put some statistical analysis to it, Jonathan. Bring it back to a level keel. What was your Steelers elite side?
Yeah, all my players have iced for the team. I've got Jody Lehman in goal, backed up by Jeff Woolhouse, the best backup. Statistically, the numbers say no netminder who was signed as a backup and played as a backup put up better numbers than Jeff Woolhouse. Defensively, again, Steve Munn's there. I've got him with Ben O'Connor, the best British defenceman the Steelers have had on their roster. Sarich and Bollybrook make up my second defensive pair, and I've gone for Mark Matheson, whose numbers were outstanding in his 2 years in Sheffield. I've got him paired with Randy Dagenet. Forward-wise, I've tried to keep together the best pair of forwards the Steelers have had in the Elite League, Waugh and Fretter, and the other best pair, Talbot and Legui. So I need someone else to go on those lines. I've gone with Tyler Mosienko, and I've gone with Robert Dowd. My third line, Ashley Tate, John Armstrong, and Ryan Finnerty. Every Steelers team has to have a player like Ryan Finnerty. He's the man for the big occasion. I always want him on my roster. My fourth line, again, the captain, Jonathan Phillips, Guillaume Debian, and I've got Jason Hewitt because I'm going with 4 British forwards and 1 British D.
Those are the thoughts then of Jonathan Fearnley. There must have been a little bit of interference on the line, Seth, then. I don't know if you caught it. It sounded like Jonathan mentioned the words Tyler and Mosienko, but I would imagine that must have just been some kind of like flutter in the internet or something. I don't know if you heard those.
For me, David, it sounded a little bit like Mosienko. It's got to be the network.
It must be. It must be a problem. It's late at night when we're recording this. Boys, let me tell you where you've all been going wrong, because this is the definitive Sheffield Steelers lineup. A man for the occasion, the man that would cure single-handedly the coronavirus given half a chance. The man that would Well, the man that, if your house was about to burn down, would rescue it. Jody Lehman in goal for the Sheffield Steelers. And the man who helped us win a championship, Jeff Woolhouse. And Jonathan, you're absolutely right on your choice of goalies. Munn is possibly the biggest, easiest, simplest no-brainer in this team. He plays alongside Rod Sarich. Dion Darling, I agree with you, Seth. No-brainer. I went with Dustin Cohn. We talked about it in episode 1. That fourth input slot for me, I looked at Shudra, I looked at Eddie, I looked at Jeremy Domish, but I went with Cohn. He had outstanding ability. And then for my two British defencemen, Mark Thomas was right in there, but I just felt that Davey Phillips edged Mark Thomas. I'm sorry, Tomo. And nobody edges Ben O'Connor. So that was my defensive lineup. Up front, I think Wire and Fretter are the best 1-2 punch we've had in the Elite League era. I think they edged Le Guy and Talbot because the standard was just a little bit higher when Wire and Fretter came around. And I am a lover of Talbot and Le Guy. Even though Talbot somehow hasn't managed to make my team, I've got a feeling he'll make our definitive team, but he didn't make my team because I went with, as a second unit, Magical Mark. Dutiam had to be in it. And I went with Connolly because I think he is just a typical Sheffield Steeler. He has to go in. And the other guy was Levi Nelson. So Nelson, Dutiam and Connolly. On my third unit, Le Guy does centre that third unit. Dow, the golden child. I think the best British forward in the league. In the Elite League era of the league, not just of the Sheffield Steelers. He is a very special player, Robert Dowd. And on the other side, a perennial winner, Ashley Tate. So I think that's a no-brainer as well. I agree with you, Seth, on that fourth line. Jonathan Phillips has to make it. And so does Guillaume Debian. And you know that I love Pernsley. I didn't love him quite as much as you. He wasn't one of the ushers at my wedding. But if I ever get married again, Ryan Finnerty might be. And Ryan Finnerty makes it in place of Perron in my lineup. And that was the definitive lineup. We never talked about coaches. As you'd expect, I'd go with Paul Thompson. Seth, you went with?
Michael Walter Blaisdell. Or Blazer.
Michael Walter Blaisdell with a dog called Sheffield as well, just to remind any Nottingham fans that are listening. And Jonathan, who did you go with behind the bench?
I couldn't quite my team, my overall team, but my team's coached by Ben Simon.
And we allowed you, Ben Simon, because we don't allow player coaches. But you were the one who didn't pick Simon as a player. You just picked him as a coach. So, boys, this is how we're going to do this. We're going to go through position at a time. The goalies, the defence, the top six and the bottom six. And let's see if we can agree on a definitive. We have 2 votes for Lehman, Jonathan, you and me. And we have 1 for Christian Bronsard. So I think we just arrogantly throw Lehman in there unless Seth can make an absolute case for Bronsard that can convince either Jonathan or myself. Feel free, Seth.
Statistically, there is no greater goalie for the Sheffield Steelers than Christian Bronsard in what he did. He lost one game out of all of the games he played in the second half of that season. He won games that no other goalie in the history of the Sheffield Steelers would have won. I'll take you back to that game in Nottingham. The reason he won it, there isn't another goalie in the history of the Sheffield Steelers that wouldn't have been up until 6 in the morning like the rest of the players. Christian Bronsard was fast asleep in bed. He led the Sheffield Steelers in a way that none of us would have imagined. Had you been able to do your job properly, David, and got him back on another contract for multiple years, then the Steelers would have seen Bronsard as not just a one-season wonder or a half-season wonder, but they would have seen him lead them to multiple trophies in the same way Jody Lehman led them at a later stage.
He was very special. He makes a good case, Jonathan. Bronsard was very special. But for me, Lehman was the guy that at a time of need, I'd walk into the dressing room and I'd look at Jody and I'd always say to him, "We're okay." And if Jody looked back and went, "We're okay," I was confident, I was comfortable. I had the feeling Jody was the man that was just leading the way. He wasn't just leading the goaltending, he was leading the defence, the forwards. He led the club. He decided which film didn't go on the bus because he always wanted to sleep because it was a boring so-and-so at that time. He was the guy who just, to me, epitomised Sheffield. He was a Debian. He was a guy who says, "Get on my back. I'm going to take you forward. And I just can't imagine a Sheffield Steelers team. And we've done this in the Elite League era, but if we'd have opened it up to the Super League and we'd have had Lang and O'Neill and Torture and Cowley and Martin Mackay, we would have still gone, I think, with Jody. I would still go with Jody Lehman. And
No.
Jonathan.
David, we've done it. And you never have. You've never gone with Jody when we've got opened up all the goalies in the history of the Steelers. You have never gone with Jody Lehman as your number one. You've always gone, I hate him, but Mike O'Neill.
No, I could never have Mike O'Neill. No, irritating little man.
The
little
numbers.
Man syndrome. I have a player in your all-time Sheffield Steelers team that suffers with little man syndrome, and O'Neill suffered with little man syndrome. Jonathan, I'm voting Lehman. Seth is voting Christian Bronsard. Be the voice of reason.
The numbers for Bronsard are outstanding, and not even the sort of, small sample size, I didn't play many games. Got it here. Save percentage, 94.4. Goals against, 1.27. Those numbers are so far out ahead of everybody else. It's ridiculous. Do you know who's second? Either of you. Who's got the second best save percentage goals against?
Jody Lehman.
No. You know who it is? I bet it's Pasi Raitanen.
Which shows maybe it wasn't all about the netminder that season. Because if our second best netminder statistically is the 9 games Pasi Raitanen played, including a couple of shutouts and a big 5-0 against Nottingham the day after Boxing Day in front of a huge crowd, if Pasi Raitanen, who came to the Steelers after conceding 4.5 a game in the BNL with Hull and a save percentage touching 85, how much better was Bronsard than Raitanen? Yeah, a bit better, but we won that league by so much. We probably would have won that league with Raitanen.
Well, let me give you 2 stories quickly before Seth combusts. Firstly, remember the standard was not great in that year. It wasn't great. Our third line was the best third line in the league, and it was Ryan Lake, Mark Lefebvre, and Steve Ellis. And that was the best.
That's how good a goalie you've got to be. You've got to know what's in front of you. That's how good you have to be to have a 94 point whatever save percentage when you've got that in front of you.
He had Barney around him. Listen, let me quickly tell you a Pasi Raitanen story. Boxing Day, Pasi Raitanen's got the call, 24 hours notice. He's a little bit hungover. He turns up in Nottingham, and Davey Lawrence, I think, was our backup goalie. And Pasi turns up and he's fat and he's chubby, and he goes to shake Dion Darling's hand, and he takes his hand out of his pocket and a load of sweets fall on the floor. And the Perrons and the Darlings of this world, they weren't over impressed with Pasi Raitanen. So they walk onto the bench where Mike Blaisdell and I were sitting at the time, and they try and make an impassionate plea that, listen, let's go with Davey Lawrence. We don't need to go with Pasi. Let's go with Davey Lawrence. We know exactly what we're getting with Davey. We'll protect Davey. This big fat Finnish guy who eats sweets, we're not going to go with him. Blazer goes, no, not a chance. We're definitely going with Pasi. So Perron and Dudium and Darling, and they're all unhappy. They walk back into the dressing room. Pasi has started to get undressed, and Pasi will be the first to admit he hasn't got the figure of the likes of myself. He's a big chubby guy. And he also wore a leopard skin thong. And the boys walk in and they see this fat guy in a leopard skin thong, and they go, this is ridiculous. And they come back out onto the bench and they go, you've got to be kidding me. This is not going to happen. Blazer again convinces them it's going to happen. And I think we win the game. Did we win it 3-0? I think we win it 3-0. We go back the next night into Sheffield. I think we beat Nottingham 4-2. Pasi is a hero from that day onwards. So a good Pasi Raitanen story. But have you changed your mind, Jonathan? It's 1-1 at the moment. We're in overtime, and you have now got to make the decision who gets that final slot in goal. Is it Lehman? Is it Bronsard?
I'll just correct you on the scores. You're right on the results. Raitanen did win both of those Christmas games against the Panthers. It was 7-3 on the road. It was 5-0 at home. He even stopped a 2-0 break at one point in that shutout win. No, I'm sticking with Jody Lehman. Now, the numbers for Lehman are exceptional. Of course they are. but mainly in his final couple of seasons. His first couple of Steelers seasons weren't outstanding. I remember when we first picked him up thinking, oh, great, we've got a Grand Slam goalie here. And then spending a year and a half being a bit disappointed with him. But when those big games came, when the title run-ins were happening and when the playoff finals were happening, we got the absolute best of Jody Lehman. And I trust him in a big game, and I want him in this team. So, yeah,
Jonathan,
Jody Lehman gets the vote.
Confirm to me, did Lehman win the last two playoff finals, 2-0 against Coventry and then 2-0 against Nottingham?
Yeah, that's not the only shutout he had in a final for the Steelers either. He had a shutout in the Knockout Cup final as well. So, yeah, big games. Jody Lehman's there for us.
And Seth, I love Bronsard, but go with us on this one. What other player in the history of the Sheffield Steelers would win a playoff final against them like down the road and on the buzzer, would not turn to his coach, would not turn to his players, would not turn to his own fans, but would skate into the middle of the Nottingham fans and bang the glass and go, screw you. That in itself has got to put Lehman in the all-time Sheffield stump. Seth?
I've been outvoted.
You have?
You know,
You have.
I'm not going to change
you
your
might
mind.
get outvoted.
No, I'm not going to get outvoted. It happens once.
Okay, I'm sure you'll win your way on a couple of the other ones. Jonathan, I think we'll bully Seth on the second goalie as well. Firstly, we can't have a man who hates the Sheffield Steelers in an all-time Sheffield Steelers lineup. And secondly, we can't have a man who actually has never played for the Sheffield Steelers in an all-star Sheffield Steelers team, can we? It has to be Woolhouse, doesn't it?
Bronsard, Reitonen, Woolhouse. Statistically, Wooly has got the third best numbers. But again, when he was trusted, he came up big. The 2010-11 season is going to be a tight race. We know it's going to be tight, and Irvins Mustakovs has got to go off for a weekend to play for Latvia. Hull away, Nottingham at home. It's February, and it's tight. He gets us the win in Hull, 7-5, and he gets us as far as penalties. Those 3 points were massive. We won that title on tiebreakers. We needed every point we got. The only 2 games he started, he did his job. You'll take 3 points out of 4 from a backup every single time. When he came in subsequent seasons in replacement of De Caro, excellent. That's why the numbers are so high. He was so reliable, gave the starter a night off and won the games without any fuss at all. The standard of the league is going up. Yeah, he was maybe only playing the teams towards the bottom of the standings, but he didn't disappoint. And the coach kept saying, yeah, get out there. We trust you. He did the job time and time and time again.
You're going to put Jeff Woolhouse in as your number 2. Who's going to be your number 3 and your number 4? Because, playing devil's advocate here, Woolhouse struggled to put half a season together without getting injured, even as a backup.
We're playing a game for our lives. He's only got to play 60 minutes. It's a game for our lives this team is playing.
Well, exactly. Don't you remember?
Yeah.
Christian Bronsard wasn't here long enough to get injured.
Oh, I think he probably played more minutes than Woolhouse in less than half a season than Woolhouse played in 5 years.
Great Woolhouse story.
Yeah, Bronsard about another 450 more minutes for Bronsard than Woolhouse all time.
Do you want a Woolhouse story, Jonathan?
Always.
2:00 in the morning, phone rings. Lean out of bed, pick the phone up. Hello? And it's Finner. And it's the night before a game in Dundee. And I have the feeling at 2:00 in the morning, Ryan might have had a couple of drinks. And he goes, in a very drunken Canadian accent, House is starting tomorrow in Dundee. And I go, why on earth is House starting tomorrow in Dundee? It's a big game. I've promised Johnny tonight that House is starting. And basically, Johnny De Caro has taken Finner out drinking the night before a Scottish doubleheader weekend. And both of them are worse than aware. And whatever, Finner, and I put the phone down at 2:15 in the morning, whatever it is. Anyway, about 9:30, the phone goes in the morning, and I'm still in Birmingham, and Ryan is sobered up and he's on the bench, and he goes, did I phone you last night? I said, yes, Ryan, you did. He said, what did I tell you? I said, you told me that House was going to start. You'd been out with Johnny. And Finner had totally forgotten it, the conversation, and House had turned up with his kit bag, and he got on and he looked at Finner as he got onto the bench, and I'm starting tonight, coach, stick with me. And Johnny had walked on, he got his sunglasses on, he wasn't starting, and Finner had forgotten all about this drunken promise he'd made to De Caro, but fortunately, House won the game up in Dundee. House gets the vote, Lehman gets the vote. Our goaltending is now sorted, boys. It is now sorted. We move on to the defence. I think, as far as the defence goes, we have no arguments at all over Steve Munn because we've all gone for him, and I think we all think he was an incredible player. Saric is the other one we both go for, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bollebrook seems to be. O'Connor is the one that we all go for as well. So let's keep Benny in there as well. The big question here is whether we go 4 defensemen or 5 defensemen. Seth, you and I have gone 4 defensemen. Jonathan has gone 5 import defensemen. So we will obviously cross that bridge when we come to it. I went with Dustin Cohn. I was the only one who went with Dustin Cohn. You two both went with Bollebrook.
The big thing about Cohn, and we discussed this before, you suggested he could play with Dion Darling. We both agreed he wouldn't make it through the first day of training session, of training camp, with Dion Darling as his partner. So I think we've got to just kick that one into touch before we even get started.
Okay, so I give you Cohn. Jonathan, you didn't have Darling in your lineup. I
wouldn't be opposed to having Dion Darling in my lineup. Again, he's just one of the
I'd like to
ones
see
that
you
doesn't
argue
make
with
the
him.
cut.
Yeah. I don't think anybody wants that. I think the daddy hat. So we got Munn and Saric. We got Darling and O'Connor. So then the question is whether we go with, and we've all decided that Phillips is ahead of Thomas. So
can I just make the argument then of Phillips ahead of my British forward? Because I've gone Jason Hewitt. I have to pick 2. I love it, but I'm taking the British Bulldog, Phillips. So that's the I made. Are you two going to overrule that? Do you need the extra space for the import forwards?
But why? Why would you do that?
Balance. You just got to get the players that I wanted in. And I basically essentially chose Matheson over some of the other forwards. So I needed the 5th import defenseman.
I am the chairman of the Jason Hewitt fan club. Absolutely love Jason Hewitt. On the ice, off the ice. But he doesn't make the all-time greatest Sheffield Steelers team, in my opinion. And I think Davey Phillips is a better addition because he gives you more. We've got Matheson. We've still got an import slot left, so we can discuss Matheson. I think the question we're discussing now is whether we go with the 2 Brits on the back end or the 1. And if we only go with the 1 on the back end, we've got some very awkward decisions to make. We're basically saying if we go with 1 import, if we go with 1 British defenseman, Jason Hewitt makes this team. So I don't want to make it about Jason Hewitt right off the bat, but does Jason Hewitt make your all-star Sheffield Steelers team, Seth?
No, he doesn't. Well, if you're going to go with that, maybe you have to look at other British players that maybe you would bring into the equation. And at that point...
Well, then would you bring Colin Shields in?
Or would you bring in Liam Kirk? Or would you potentially have a look around and see if there was somebody else that tickled your fancy in a different way, maybe? I don't know. I like, we're talking about a defenseman who played in the American League in Davey Phillips. We're talking about a guy who's gone and he's played the top tier of the World Championships with Great Britain, as averse to Jason Hewitt, with the best will in the world. The highest level he ever played was with the Sheffield Steelers. And to me, you just can't have a look at that and just see it as being like for like. I think you're picking from different salary shelves, and I think you're picking from different shelves in terms of the caliber and ability of the players. I know that my discount at Bauer is now out of the window, and that's very frustrating because my son only wants to use Bauer products. But I think the reality is we're not talking about the same level of player, and so it isn't a like-for-like choice, in my opinion. Okay,
Seth, are we bullying Jonathan on this one then? And we're going with Davey Phillips, and then we need one more import defenseman with Munn, Darling, and Sarich. Jonathan is going to make a big case, I think, here for Mark Matheson. Far away with that case, Jonathan.
The numbers from his 17-18 season are ridiculous and unsurpassed by other import defensemen that we've had. 65 points. No import D has ever had more assists than that. No defenseman has ever had more assists than that for the Sheffield Steelers during a season. We've got so many quality forwards. We need to make sure there's the supply line there. I want Mark Matheson in my team. But there's the extra longevity of a Dagenet or a Bollybrook. I'm willing to be convinced by you guys on this one. I'm not particularly keen to argue too heavily one way or the other. So I'm happy with... Well, I've picked all three in my team, so I'm happy for any of those to make the final spot.
I think we can cut three into two. I mean, Matheson, Bollybrook, I think are at a different level. God, he's going to watch this as well, and he's one of life's all-time good people. And if you put in a Steelers list of all-time good people, Randy Dagenet probably captains that team. But is Randy Dagenet one of the six best defensemen, one of the four best import defensemen that have ever played for the Steelers in the Elite League era? I don't think danger is. I think it's a straight choice myself between, if you like, on the left, Jonathan, and on the right, Seth's choice of Kevin Bollybrook. Seth?
I think Kevin Bollybrook just gives you a little bit of everything. He is a serial winner as well. If you look throughout his career, he has gone and won. He's won in Denmark. He's won in the UK on a couple of occasions as well. He has that American League experience. He has that Team Canada experience. He is somebody that has the ability to change how your hockey club looks. On the other side of that, off the ice, he's somebody that is a great addition to your locker room because he was somebody that could float between each of the different camps in there. And even when the Sheffield Steelers locker room at times was at its most split, and I would say that was probably one of the times would have been in the Ben Simon era where you had different camps doing different things at different times. And God loved Ben Simon because he did very well to get it through to the end of the season. But he was a rookie coach that made an awful lot of mistakes in how he treated some of his older players. And this is why he's not going to be the coach of our club when we move forward. But Kevin Bollybrook was somebody that found that middle ground between Ben Simon and the rest of the team when he needed to do it. Simon was this intense character that expected everybody did things his way, and there was no other way to operate, as far as I could see it. Yet on the ice, in the locker room, and then away from the rink, he was one of those that was able to just bump between the coach and maybe knock off some of those rough edges at times and allow that dialogue to take place. And Kevin Bollybrook, he gives you that. And he's going to be the one that maybe will just rub off the edge of Dion Darling when he's being a bit too gnarly in that locker room and causing absolute mayhem in there. But on the ice, smooth skating. For me, he's the best first pass defenseman the Sheffield Steelers have ever had. And when we've got all of these flying forwards around, you've got to be able to get them the puck. And one thing that Bollybrook did really, really well, better than anybody else for me, he stepped out and that hard, flat first pass that hit the tape, either side of the ice, he could do that. And he's going to set us going. Every time we win it back, Bollybrook sends us back on our way.
Jonathan, when I was putting my team together, I rang a few players about different guys. And Seth makes a point about Bollybrook being that first pass, getting the puck to the forwards quickly. If there's a criticism of Matheson, it's that he holds onto the puck too long and he catches up with the forwards and he ends up leading the charge. And the forwards weren't comfortable, perhaps playing with him as much as. Is that a valid point?
It is a valid point. I think a lot of it is also what team has he got around him. If you don't have the all-star talent, up top on the line that you're out with, then maybe Matheson has to do a little bit more himself. Are we saying that Matheson doesn't have the game to be adaptable to the players around him? I think he probably does. We've seen a slightly different Matheson this season in Nottingham to the one we saw in Sheffield. He isn't leading the rush so much. It is a bit more, let's get the puck to Sam Herr. But he's still contributing all the goals, still being a huge power play threat. Matheson's a top defenseman, but I'm more than happy to go with Bollybrook on this one.
Well, I think we've concluded the first part, haven't we, of this Elite League All-Star Sheffield Steelers team. We've got our goaltending sorted out. We've got our defence sorted out. Let's just recap. We're going with Jody Lehman as our starting goalie and Jeff Woolhouse as our backup. And then on the blue line, Steve Munn, what a certainty he was for pretty much everybody. Rod Sarich he's paired with. Dion Darling and Kevin Bollybrook, our second unit. And then Ben O'Connor and Davey Phillips. That's our defence. We move on to the forwards. There's a lot more debate still to come.